Hello guys, I'm back from another video and today we're talking about what if Deku was reincarnated into Genshin Impact. So, in the last video we talked about how after waking up pretty early in the morning so they can finally, start off their final battle between them and also, Raiden Shogun's, army. And so after waking up, they would start going their usual, their usual routine, which is, playing out their attack as after being told that, him and, Lumine are going to be going towards a little route where they can go through a large, clearing so they can finally make it to, where Raiden Shogun's palace is so they can finally defeat her. So, as everybody's basically going off to their, specific jobs, like for example, Yoimiya basically acting as like a distraction, which, by using several explosives to basically create a large, distraction by basically, creating several fireworks to basically distract the enemies, while the rest are going to be, distracting the other, guards that are basically, protecting the palace. And for, Izuku and, Lubin, they're gonna be acting as like, their final stretch. So they're gonna be acting as like, the ones that are gonna be defeating, Raiden Shogun. So, after, a while of basically, basically flying there, they would make it towards, the location of the, of Raiden Shogun's, palace. They would start fighting off some of the minions. And after defeating some of them, they would start to go into the palace proper. But we basically look towards a different perspective. In this case, a girl that seems to be almost fox-like, with fox-like ears and a fox-like tail. She seems to be wearing a Shrine Maiden outfit, and after talking to her fellow Shrine Maidens, apparently her name was Yoimika. So, after she left, she would mostly say about how they're gonna be protecting, both Lumine because of an important, fact about her, and, Izuku Midoriya, because apparently they're pretty much important. I mean, makes sense, after all, they are the protagonists. So, as Izuku and, Lumine are basically making through all of the, all of the floors of, Raiden Shogun's castle, they would arrive at a pretty large ass area which they think they're gonna be attacked by. Or at least get attacked by. But, you know, apparently Chill Day was there. And would basically, tell them how, you know, apparently, Miss, La Senora has been, acting like what he calls a yandere, whatever the fuck he calls it. He doesn't really remember the actual pronunciation, but Izuku already knows what that means. And let's just say he's quite terrified of knowing that. So, after a bit of explanation and also telling him that they should probably, keep their guard up against her because she's sort of, not really in a good place right now. And so, after he left, they would basically start to open the, large, the large, not really torii gates, but more like, the typical, Japanese sliding, doors that they would usually have in their houses. So, after opening up that specific door, they would look over and would see Raiden Shogun, sitting on her throne. But before they can actually attack her, La Senora would finally arrive, as she would basically proclaim that she's gonna be taking, Izuku as her own, and nobody's gonna stop her, as they would start to fight. After a while of fighting, Lumine and Izuku would basically defeat La Senora, but not before, Raiden Shogun was about to attack her. She would basically stand up as her body would start being, being engulfed in flames. Almost similar to, how do I say this? To a certain, guy from My Hero Academia, but except, without the ice side. Actually, technically, she does have the cryo delusion, but either way, she seems to be, completely in fire. And she seems to be almost moth-themed, with the several, moth-like butterflies or whatever they are, made out of pyro energy, and she would basically create a sword made of fire, and would almost charge towards, Lumine, as before Izuku can do anything else, he would basically jump forward as his body would start being engulfed into, starts being engulfed in, both not cryo, I meant pyro and electro energy. And after the whole, debacle was done, it turns out that he finally created the full Susano, but not as, big as the actual full Susano. Like, literally like continents large. Or at least I think. More like, entire, like, cities large. But instead, about the size of, like, you know, about the size of a ruined guardian. Think of it as, like, the Tengu ass, one. But except of a, instead of a, a simple, like, sword or, something like a sword, well, instead he would have a flaming scythe and an electric sword. And not only that, instead of having 2 wings, instead it had 4. You know, 4 wings, as these seem to be, glowing with, both electro and pyro energy. But before we basically, before Izuku can actually attack, La Signora, we basically ended off the episode right there. So yeah, that is basically the explanation about what happened last episode. And so, let's talk about what happens next. So, as we get back to, where where they're about to collide, Izuku would create a large blast of energy, which is similar to Indra's arrow, but except for, without the arrow, but more of the, sword instead. As after creating that slash made out of, mostly, just electro energy instead of, like, the regular, like, blue energy that usually comes out of, like, Indra's arrow, La Signora would start, to fall, as La Signora would start to fly away after, being attacked by him, as she would say this: "Rostam, why do you fight me? I thought you remember me." As, Izuku would just look at her as he would say, "I said, I don't know you. Like, who the hell is Rostam?" And as she would say this: "It's her. It's her fault," she would say, pointing her, her weird-looking flaming sword at, at Lamine, as she would say, "It's her fault. She corrupted you, right? I'll..." As she would just charge towards, Lamine, as Lamine would basically dodge out of the way, using her electro energy to basically propel her. She would start to, use a bit of, of geo energy to start, creating little, like, pillars of, of crystals, almost similar in color to, the geo energy color, basically. As she would, after, doing that, she would start creating, little blasts of air, or more specifically, animal energy towards, La Signora, as La Signora would start getting pelt with them. As La Signora would just be pissed. As La Signora would say this: "You little brat." After saying this, she would start creating several, flaming butterflies, as these flaming butterflies would charge towards her. She would dodge out of the way for obvious reasons, as Izuku would just look at her as he would say this: "Let's try this out." After saying this, several, like, charges of energy would start, appearing out of nowhere, more specifically, pyro energy, which started forming into large-ass monstrous beasts, almost resembling, just imagine them like... just imagine them as Grim, but except of, like, all of them just, like, having just, like, normal ass, like, just like black fur. Instead, they're basically on fire. And not only that, instead of having skull-like faces, instead they're covered by, how do I see this? Yeah, imagine them being covered by, by geo chunks, basically like chunks of earth. As Izuku would say this: "Now, charge forward, Los Lobos." After saying this, he would basically snap his fingers, and these gigantic creatures, which resemble Grimm, more specifically Beowulfs, but, they can't really, like, walk on 2 legs, because, when I first started watching, Ruby, I sort of decided, to watch some of the episodes, and I was, sort of bored after a while. I mean, I'm still pretty much liking, the Ruby series, but, I was a bit bored, and so I started watching Ruby Chibi. Yeah, just imagine them just like that in the actual, like, Ruby, chibi series, where they're basically like, not really in their hind legs. Instead, they're just like, walking on two legs. I meant all, like, both sets of legs. As you would charge forward, as you would stab, not really stab, but more like bite into La Senora. After being stabbed with them, they would explode. Yeah, I'm basically taking this off of, Bleach. Like, more specifically, Coyote Starks' Los Lobos ability, which literally allows him to basically create tons and tons of wolves, which basically act as like a pact. So, yeah, after, getting, bitten by one of them, they would explode, creating several, like, shards of, like, geo energy basically coming off of them. As to a scratcher, as you'd say, ow, that hurt! Why did you do that? She would basically look at, Izuku as you'd say this. I told you, stop. And I mean stop doing that. You would basically look at her as you'd say, I'm not your damn, whatever you call him. I'm not him. I swear to God, he would basically say that. I should say this. But you are my Rostam. You're not that, that bitch's slave. She would basically glare back at Izuku, not Izuku, I meant, mean. As she'd say, I'll kill you. After, charging towards her once again, Izuku would start creating, just imagine, basically white Zetsus. Yeah, basically just like white Zetsus, Zetsus, but except, instead of basically being made out of this white material, instead, they're made out of, of this green energy. More specifically, almost similar to, almost similar in color to, the Geo, not Geo, I meant, the, yeah, the Dendro, color, which is basically just like a greenish color. As after they would appear, they would basically, tank the attack, as they would charge forward, creating, several shards of wood. Specifically, how, like, wood style basically works. More specifically, Obito when he was in his rage state. What do I mean by this? Well, just remember him when he first saw, Rin died, aka, is, his, crush. And let's just say that sort of made him into a completely mad berserker and would basically kill everybody using wood style. Yeah, just imagine him just like that. So, after a while, basically, basically a while basically doing that, specifically Obito, yeah, that was not really fun. So these white Zetsus would basically, act similar to that, and they would charge forward, basically turning their arms into basically whips, or, shards of wood, almost similar to knives, or their claws would start turning into sharp pieces of wood, and they would start charging toward La Senora, as they would start scratching her and slashing her. After a while of fighting, La Senora would basically fall. As she would say this, how did I lose? I should not have lost. Come on, my Rostam, just let me. But before she could say anything else, she would be sliced. Her body would be slumped over after being sliced by something. As Izuku would say this, what? He would basically look towards, where the slash came from and look towards her. Raiden Shogun. She seems to be wielding a sword that's similar to a katana, and it seems to be made out of pure electro energy. As she would say this, hello there, Izuku Midoriya, she would say. Now, because of that little annoyances, I decided to kill her, she would say. Sorry about that, wait for a second. She would say, so, Izuku Midoriya, I want you to come with me. I want you to join me and become my king. The second shogun of, of Inazuma, she would say. As Izuku would say this, like I said, I am not going to be your damn husband. And besides, I like somebody else. And I also technically have, he would basically say under his breath, son of a harem, he would basically say. But he would basically shake his head and he would say, sorry, but I'm not joining you. As she would say this. if you don't want to join me, then she would start, shifting. Almost the area basically shifting into almost a weird ass area, almost resembling a Zen garden, with several lines seem to be created by, almost similar created by, a rake basically, scraping through the sand. As several rocks were basically, there. As after looking around, he would see that they're basically on a platform and the sky was just pure black with several red lines almost similar to the aurora borealis, and in the middle was Raiden Shogun herself in a posture similar to the lotus position. She seems to be almost meditating as she would say this. Now, Izuku Midoriya, as Lumine would say this, what are you doing? And as she would say this, do not interfere, Miss Lumine. As she would say, but he's my boy. But before she can say anything else, she would create a slash, specifically, Raiden Shogun. As she would say, do not interfere. As she would step back, as Izuku would say this, don't you dare hurt her. As she would say this, don't worry, I won't. But I want you to say this. Say more specifically that you will fight me, she would say, as Izuku would say this. Why? As she would say this. 1. If I win, you'll be my husband and you're gonna be staying in Inazuma forever. And as for Lumine over here, well, she can be one of your mistresses. But if you win, I'll do whatever you want. Okay, she would say, as Izuku would say this. Fine, he would basically say, and besides, I won't lose. After saying this, she would say, how cocky. After all, I am a goddess. Or should I say an archon. As her sword would basically appear, and her other hand would be a pole arm. More specifically, a naginata. Which, seems to be in designs, or at least in the design that's similar to, to Raiden Shogun's sword. As she would say this. Now, are you really ready to fight? As Izuku would say this. Ready as I'll ever be. As he would basically wield all 3 of his weapons, similar to, Zoro in the Wano arc. Specifically, the scythe is in his hand, or at least not really in his hand, but more like in his mouth. The other side is currently on his hip, still in his hip, because he doesn't really have, 2 other arms, for God's sake. So, as he's basically wielding, the Tempest Blade on his, on one of his hands, and the Blade of Gaia on his other. As he would basically, wield them all in sync, as he seems to be almost ready. As you'd say this, so you're ready? He would basically say, as she would say this, really much, pretty much, she would say, as she would curl her, naginata in almost a, helicopter-like position, as she would basically wield her sword, almost holding on to it for dear life, as the battle would begin. As Izuku would charge over, as he would start creating, a little bit of a storm nearby. More specifically, in the battlefield, as the storm would start raging, almost similar to a typhoon. A typhoon. As the typhoon would basically rage on, several shards of ice would basically appear out of the sky, or at least the sky in this world, which, if you realized, is basically the realm of Euthymia, or at least I think that's the name of that world. So, wait for a second. So, as after, charging in at her, several shards of ice would start slamming into her, as the electricity would almost, strike her down, as she would say, this is incredible. How is he that powerful? Even I'm an Archon, and more specifically, the Electro Archon. My element is basically being used, and it's more powerful than mine, she would basically say in her mind, as Izuku would say this. How does it feel that your element, more specifically the Electro element, is basically against you right now? As she would say this. Quite interesting, she would say. Now, let's try this out. As she would start, coating her, sword in, electricity, more specifically electro energy. As she would slam it into the ground, as it would cause a large earthquake in the realm of Euthymia. Currently, outside of, the plains of Euthymia. Currently, everybody's, feeling the immense pressure from the battle in Raiden Shogun's, realm, or more specifically, in Raiden Shogun's home. Which, let's just say, everybody's thinking, just hope, I just hope that Raiden Shogun slash Izuku slash, Lumine is winning. All of them are basically thinking, as currently with, with her, aka, Kujisara, she would think, please Izuku, please Izuku, please Izuku, please be okay, please be okay, please be okay. She would basically say in her mind. As she would realize that she's still fighting somebody, as she would say, alright. As she would basically start shooting out, more arrows at her enemies nearby, as she would say, please be okay by Izuku, she would basically say in her mind. So, going back to Izuku. Izuku is currently, still pretty much fighting, her, aka, Raiden Shogun. As Raiden Shogun would say this, you're strong, but she would basically, charge up her attack as she would create another slash at him. Izuku would basically dodge it away as he would say this, alright, let's try this out. As he would start using that, that large half and half Susano again. As the electro sword would start, charging up. As he would create a similar slash, just like, just exactly like, Raiden Shogun's, but it's 10 times more powerful. After being slashed by it, she would say, he's quite strong, she would say. As Izuku would start, pulsing up his, his large flaming scythe, as he would basically slam it onto the, floor. As it would create a large kaboom! As the, the sand nearby would basically be flown out of the way and soon turn into glass. As currently with Lumine was just like, oh my god, she would basically say in her mind. Sorry about that. So, after, that attack, Raiden Shogun would say this, enough of this. And so would activate her second form. And you probably know this form pretty recognizably. Yeah, just imagine this bullshit right there. Yeah, God, when I first saw this, I thought of when I instantly saw it, I just imagined, why does she look like a Persona? Yeah, you can't tell me otherwise. She kind of looks like a freaking Persona at that point. Like, seriously. All of the almost doll-like joints. It kind of gives me, Persona 3 slash, 4 vibes. Just because of that. And it's not helping that she was Japanese themed, because she's also giving me, what's the name of that persona? Yeah, Izanagi slash, a little bit of ish, what is that name of that persona? I can't remember the actual name of that persona, but it was, Yaiko's, persona. The, Snow Girl. I can't remember all of the names of the persona cast because it's been a long time since I actually, watched or, even heard of the series. And by the way, still waiting on Persona 6. Come on! I want to see more of that bull! Anyway, continuing on with the episode. After transforming into this form, she would start using more electricity. Not helping because, she would start creating, several sword slashes which, would just basically, home in on him, basically. Izuku would still dodge out of the way, but thanks to the homing ability of his, of those slashes, Izuku would dodge out of the way, significantly making him a little bit afraid for his life. As Izuku would say this, well, shit. As he would basically say out of his head, as you'd say, guess I'll have to try this then. As he would basically, thanks to, his Susanoo-like form, he would basically, start creating more electricity. Thanks to the sword basically, charging up from that electricity that was, basically charging at him, he would also start to, create, a large dragon-like head. As you'd say this, Now, take this as your lightning dragon. As you'd basically slam it down towards, Raiden Shogun, the Azure Dragon made of, hydro energy and mixed in with a little bit of, electro energy would basically slam into her. After getting slammed into this, getting slammed into by, this large dragon, it would explode into a large stream of water and, electricity. As the electricity would basically burn her a little bit, as she would basically fall onto one knee. As she would say this, "You're strong. I forfeit," she would say. As Izuku would say this, "Now, good." After saying this, he would say, "Now, ask for my reward. I want you to stop this stupid purging of all of these, stop all of the purging of these, all of my men. More specifically, all of the vision holders." After saying this, she would say, "But it would bring ruin. It would destroy. It could even defy my..." As Izuku would say this, "I don't care. Just stop all of this senseless bloodshed." After saying this, she would say, "But why? But why?" she would say, as Izuku would say this. "Well, because, I don't want to see people just suffering just because of you. So please just stop this. Please, just listen to me." After saying this, she would look back at Izuku as she would say this, "Sure, I'll stop." After saying this, Izuku would say this, "Thank God." As Izuku would say this, "Now, mind telling me how we're gonna get out?" As Lumin would say this, "Yeah, please." As she would say, "Very well." And so, would basically bring them back to the normal world. After bringing them back to the normal world, she would basically come out of their castle, or at least their castle, specifically, Raiden Shogun's castle, as Izuku and, Lumin would be right by her side. As all the soldiers were fighting, they would look up and would see Raiden Shogun, as she would create a lightning storm. As everybody would start becoming a little bit on edge, mostly the rebels, as she would say this, "I'm done. There's no longer a war here. It's no longer the time of retribution. No longer will this day be a day of mourning, a day of oppression. This day, I will stop the Vision Hunt decree." After saying this, everybody would just be in shock, sorry about that, including the rebels, as all of them would start looking towards, Izuku and Lumin, as they would start to cheer, as all of the guards would basically kneel down and would basically answer her orders, including, Kujisara, which she's currently happy that knowing that Izuku is pretty much okay. As Izuku would say this, "Thank you, Raiden Shogun." But before he can say anything else, Raiden Shogun would basically come up to him, as she would basically grab him by the, cheek, and would say, "Not so fast," she would say, as before he can say anything else, he kisses him right on the lips. Everybody was in complete shock, including Lumin, as she's currently fuming right now. Currently with, Kujisara, even though she's basically a loyal lapdog to her, well, she couldn't take it anymore, as she would say to herself, "Did she just kiss Izuku?" She would start fuming after, seeing this, as she would basically start, flying towards their area. As Izuku would say this, "What was that for?" As she would say this, "Well, because you asked for this, well, the end of the, wait for a second. The end of the Vision Hunt decree, well, you're going to be marrying me, so you can keep that, that promise." After saying this, Lumin would say this, "This is unfair, you can't do that." As she would say, "Oh, and why can't you, and you really think that you can stop me?" She would say, "I can probably just tell everybody to start going back to their, Vision Hunt decree orders." As before she could say anything else, we currently see, a fuming ass, a fuming as, what is her name? Yeah, Kujisara. I should say this. Alright, I tolerated you enough, Raiden Shogun, she would say. But you kissing you kissing, Izuku Midoriya right there is making me a little bit pissed, she would basically say, as, Raiden Shogun would basically be a little bit surprised, as they would start to argue, including, Lumine. Currently, Izuku is basically there, just like dumbstruck, and a little bit, basically like a blushing mess. Even though he's sort of used to it right now, but, he didn't expect that all that much. I mean, literally being kissed by a freaking Archon. Yeah, that is certainly an interesting way to basically end off this episode. So yeah, as Izuku is basically thinking in his mind, saying, what the fuck just happened? We basically end off the episode right there. So yeah, I hope you liked the video, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!